are you today?
Good.
Yeah? Hanging in there? So, my name is Kate Manson. I'm the director of the theater program. I go by they, them. So today we're doing the start of the field prep series. I'm going to be putting my glasses on and off all the time. So, and this one's designers and production managers in the city. And today we have with us Valerie Bart, who is a scenic and costume designer, Lauren Parrish, who is a production manager and lighting designer, and Seda S.B. Proctor, who you might know is a faculty member here, who is sound and media design. So I have a few questions to ask them, and then we'll open it up to y'all to ask questions. And my first one's just a good start one, which is, what are some of your favorite projects you've worked on and have been working on now or in the past? And we'll just do it sort of rounds. Do you want to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
Hi. One of my favorite projects was doing Viet Gone by Nguyen. And one of the biggest reasons is because basically told the story of my family, from the exact same background. My parents went through the same exact thing. And I remember seeing the world premiere of it when it came here. The world premiered in California and it came over here later at Manhattan Theater Club. And they say when you really see yourself in representation matters. Like I had never ever felt that before, and seeing it for the first time, it brought up all of these emotions. I was like a crying mess watching it. And when I received the opportunity to design it at Denver Center, I just took it right away. And it was an amazing experience. I got to use my own family photos as primary research and interviewing my own parents, asking questions about who took this photo, what were you doing, where was it? Things that I had never bothered to ask before. And this is my own story, my ancestry. And it was just one of the most fulfilling projects. And then I had a second opportunity to design it again at the Alley Theater, and of course, when I did it as well. And then had the opportunity to do the world premiere of Poor Yellow Rednecks, which is the sequel to Get Gone, which was supposed to also premiere here at the Manhattan Theater Club, and then it hit. And I think it's going to premiere in 2023. So looking forward to that.
Great, thank you. Lauren.
Okay, so as a production manager, my favorite piece is Camille Brown's Black Girl Magic linguistic play. I really love that piece, and it was a time to feel a lot of growth in her company, and we had been touring, it was part of a trilogy, we had been touring the first part, and I had been production managing and stage managing and lighting supervising that piece, so seeing the growth of the trilogy was really beautiful. It was just such a magical piece. And as a lighting designer, I think I'm going to choose Megan Williams' one-woman show because I just love the choreography and how she approaches collaboration. It's a really lovely piece to work on.
One of my favorite projects I did was called Citrus by Celeste Jennings and directed by Janika Holloway at Northern Stage. It was the last regional show that I did before everything shut down, and I did both sound and projections. It was very exciting because Citrus is a choreo poem, so in the same tradition of Ntozake Shange, being able to fuse poetry, movement, and dance together. For the sound design, looking at a very minimal palette of how to have a heightened sense of breath in the space. And then for projections, being able to play around with all the other different design disciplines. So being able to project onto the floor, being able to project onto costumes, even being able to use some of the windows in a set to be able to have images and also colors to be able to collaborate with lighting. So being able to really fuse the projection design within all the other disciplines, and then just have that holistic sense of play in it was one of my The other one I would say is called Finding Pandora X, which is a virtual reality theater play. So I did sound design for that. And I'll never forget the first time I put on the VR headset to do a site visit. And, as you know, for when you're working on a show, you go and you see the theater, you see all the quirks and everything in there, but being in this virtual space of this, being on Mount Olympus, and then being in a Cyclops cave, and being able to support this sense of scale and wonder, in your living room, but you feel like you're in this colossal environment, was one of the most exciting and challenging parts of the work.
It's the season of getting ready to graduate, and that's kind of what field prep is all about, sort of us talking about as professionals, sort of how we got started and trying to demystify that process a little bit, although I think it's different for everyone, and so that's kind of one of the questions I wanted to, because I feel like even when I was in college, when I was looking at artists and their sort of careers and practice, it felt like to me that it just appeared, right? And I was always trying to be like, how do I get it to appear? Like, what magic spell do I need to have, right? And it's something that's quite long and curvy, with lots of tangents and things like that. So I'm curious if you could talk about sort of starting out, what was it like for you to start? And also, I also want to do a caveat in that you'll hear a lot of, well, this thing stopped and that thing stopped because of the pandemic and things are shifting. So these are historical remembrances of times, and I think we'll talk about the pandemic a little too. But I'm curious, so starting out, like, how was that? What happened?
Oh, man. Yeah, and I guess the caveat is, this is my own personal, story, and, I hope it offers some insight that by all means, everyone has their own path. I actually started out in fashion, and that's what I gravitated towards. I love the idea of expressing, yourself through clothing, but found that it was very much a business of selling an image that I wasn't interested in. And I remember, and I graduated from this community college, and I went back to the chair of the fashion department, and she was like, you should try theater. And I've always found that your designs tended to be very theatrical, and I was like, okay. So I didn't know what theater was, really. I never had any exposure to it. So I went to the theater department. They happened to be hiring for a costume technician. No idea what that was either. So, I applied and I got the job and spent the season, working in a costume shop, doing things like alterations and pulling from their stock and sewing and, fitting actors. And it was fascinating. And I remember the set designer at one point was like, do you want to see the set? I said, what is that? And he took me out to the house, and they were doing Anything Goes musical. And so there's this giant boat on the stage. I was like, this is amazing. And I got to see the production of it, the tap dancing and everything. It was like golden age of musicals, and it was amazing. It was like everything, thinking back to my childhood, it's like everything that I really loved about, art and performing and, doing music and dance and telling a story, those are the things that I really enjoyed as a child. So it just was like, it just kind of clicked, and I was like, I must do this. This is something I must do. And I feel like I needed to get training for it. So I worked towards transferring to UCLA to get my bachelor's, and that's what I did. And I remember feeling the exact same anxiety when graduation came about, and I noticed, a lot of my classmates going to grad school. And I was like, what is that? It's like, more school? Really? So, and I felt like it was a little too late for me to figure it out. So I was like, I'll just work, I guess, and figure out this is what I'm going to do. So I ended up working for about 4 years and just reaching out to whoever, whatever contacts I had made, throughout, and did some assisting, did some work in costume shops, and designed some things here and there, and found that I was like hitting that ceiling of like, I don't think anybody's taking me seriously here. You know, it felt like there was like, I had like plateaued in a way, like this is kind of like as far as I could go. And I could see myself keep, you know, I could have kept going that way. I was like, I feel like there needs to be more. And this is such a long story, but
They always are. That's like, yeah, they always are. 'Cause it's windy.
yeah, it is. It's curvy.
Yeah.
And so someone suggested this course. It's an intensive course that was taught at the Kennedy Center when they do the KCATF festival. It's an intensive course, and it was called Designers and Directors, the Collaborative Process. And it was taught by Ming Cho Lee and Constance Hoffman. So Ming Cho Lee was the department chair at Yale School of Drama, and then Constance Hoffman was one of the professors at NYU. And it's a 2-week course, and it's geared towards literally the collaborative process between designers and directors. And I was like, great, sign me up. So I went and I took it, and there were 24 of us, designers and directors, and they put us into like little groups, and we had to pick a project and do like a paper project. And it was like big shows like Tartuffe, 7 Deadly Sins, and Titus Andronicus, and we would do these paper projects, but it wasn't about the result, it was about the collaborative process. So we would have our design meetings, you know, as a group, while everyone else would be watching this design meeting. It was so nerve-wracking. And you conduct a meeting like you normally would in a creative process, and you would ask all the questions. The caveat was, you have this 20-minute meeting, you have to ask all the questions, and when you walk away, can you design the show? Like the director is no longer available. You've asked all the questions. Can you take everything from that conversation and actually design the show? And after we would have these 20-minute meetings, then, you know, they would come in and sort of pick it apart and ask, you know, and be like, well, you asked this question this way, you know, and you could have done it this way. Like literally just the art of collaborating, which is really about listening, you know, having, you know, communicating and listening to each other and asking the questions to try to probe and get more information. So that was illuminating for me, and it sort of opened my eyes to that, the collaborative process, which I feel like I've been missing, you know, in my career. You know, I was so focused on just doing the thing, but then not really thinking about theater as like a whole. With many moving parts and people and departments and things. I was like, I have to go to grad school. Like I feel like I need to learn more, and I felt that you know, Yale School of Drama was the place for me because, you know, being taught there and so much of that course, that 2-week course was very much like his philosophy. And the thing that I was like really missing, that interdisciplinary way of approaching theater and the collaborative process. And that's, so I actually applied and I got into Yale. And it was my first time really looking at each discipline, because they make you take all of the courses and you have opportunities to, you know, design and expand. And this was my first time doing scenic design. I've been so focused on doing costumes, and, you know, so it's the first time I built a model, and it was terrifying. And it's Ming Cho Lee, who's like a legend, you know. So yeah, and then graduated and stayed in New York, and here it is.
Yep. Excellent. How about you, Lauren?
I did not go to grad school, but grad school is a really wonderful place to go. So I went to this college, and I was in the dance department, and was very much fueled by a very ugly high school theater experience where my teacher told me I would never amount to anything in theater. Oh yeah, I felt that to be true. But I come to dance later in life, and that was very challenging from a dance perspective, because a lot of the flexibility and basically the way your body changes, is it possible after a certain age? And I was coming to terms with that, and I took lighting design for dance, and if you haven't taken the lighting design class in the dance department, but you've taken it in the theater department here, go take it in the dance department, it's a completely different class. And I got to my class, and the teacher, Erin Kopp, who also went to Yale. Yes. This will be a theme. We all know each other someday. Erin sat me down and was like, "You are naturally good at this." And I was like, "Oh, that is the first time anyone has ever said that to me." And I was like, "Okay, I like doing this. I still want to perform, but I like doing this." And so I did not do, it's very standard to do like summer internships in college for theater or dance. I did not do that. My parents would not let me do that. So instead I worked at the Hudson River Museum and got a bunch of gallery installations experience there, which taught me a completely different type of lighting. And I then, worked for the Neo-Futurists in New York City when I was still in college. I founded Midnight Cabaret. Is that still happening? There we go. So I was founding member of Midnight Cabaret based on that experience, and basically the woman who was the production manager there, because if you're the production manager, you're also the lighting designer, said, "I was planning to retire, but I'm going to hold on one more year, and when you graduate, you get my job," which does not pay well. It meant I needed other jobs. But, so I knew I had that waiting for me, and I sold my car and moved to New York City, and used that to pay my rent deposit, and then basically from there, the Neo-Futurists are a kind of experimental avant-garde group, and I learned that I like to structure things. And, I was still dancing, but over time I kept injuring myself and decided to let that go. And just like my dreams became something else, which was lovely. And I was touring with a lot of dance companies as a stage manager and a lighting supervisor so that I could learn from lighting by executing other people's lighting. So I was doing that for Battleworks, I was doing that for Kegman and Company, Susan Marshall and Company, and I was fulfilling a lot of production roles. And over time, what happened is I just started to take over the room because things would be disorganized, and I would like, well, let me organize that, and let me fix this, and let me put a schedule there. And as a lighting designer, and I think this is somewhat true also in video design, you can see it in advance on a visualizer, but you really see it when you're in the room. It's not like a tangible thing like a costume is or a set is. At least you do get to see those before you're in the theater. And so I would find myself as a lighting designer at a disadvantage if the production management was not well handled. So I sort of took on co-roles, which was not necessarily as smart as I get role, for a very long time. And my style of production management is very different in that it's highly collaborative. I like to sit with the designers, and I like to say like, well, it seems like you want this, and you want this, and the director wants this, and there's this little area in between we need to kind of fill in and figure out what that's going to be. And that is very different than how a lot of production managers work, but something I felt is really great in a more lateral and less hierarchical collaborative experience. Someone who's willing to sit there and say like, well, we haven't really come to a conclusion on that. It's an idea that's out there, we need to make a decision. And over time, I just kept working. So I've done work in Lincoln Center, I've done some at Kenny Center, but I've also done it like in downtown little New York venues. And I am, as a designer, at this point in my career, I am the production manager, the associate director of production now at Abrams Art Center in New York City, and I only take design projects where I want to be in the collaborative circle because I put a lot into it, and I don't want to have to be, working on my art all the time in order to make money from my art. I prefer to do my art, and then my job is production management. So that's where how that kind of happened. But I would say that pretty much every job I've ever had, I can trace back to either Aaron Kopp or Sydney Skybetter, who is like he's now a professor at Brown. He's a dance teacher and a theorist on the intersection between technology and dance. Yeah.
Sam?
So my coming into design was very non-traditional. When I was in undergrad, I went to Virginia Tech and I was just studying theater in general. I had spent a year at University of Buffalo, and my advisor was a dramaturg, so I had worked more in that way. I had stumbled on her research as I transferred back to Virginia Tech, and I saw that she was studying the intersection between theater and technology, and I wanted to learn more about multimedia performance. So I had signed up for interactive audio and video class. I quickly learned I was way over my head with that, and it was truly one of the hardest classes that I ever took. But what it forced me to do was I would spend so many hours just studying, just playing around and studying sound and playing around and studying video. And I remember like so many times talking with my professor about how I wasn't understanding how this was coming together. And I'll never forget what he said. And he said to me, part of the challenges you have two challenges. One is you don't know what questions you have to ask. And so you're just scrambling around, just trying to pick up everything. And then the other thing is you're thinking about how it's supposed to be. There are people who will have intricate systems, there are people who will have intricate content, there are people who will have, there's so many different ways that everybody will approach their design, and you will find your own way. But you have to give yourself that space, and part of that is being able to approach and say, what is it that I want to get out of this project? If all I can get is to be able to press this button and the light goes on, then that is what you achieve for this, and that is okay, that is your benchmark. And if there is something about being able to have audio and video feed off of each other, if that is your goal and benchmark, then there's that. Every time you approach a new task, a new assignment, a new challenge, a new lesson, and to ask yourself what is it that you are hoping to get out of it, and also be receptive to what will change. And so I started to reapproach how I was looking at sound and video, and I was also using that same approach in how I was looking at design, because that was also, strangely enough, one of the other difficult course that I had. I wasn't expecting to fall in love with both disciplines, but I did. And when I finished school, I had moved into more devised performance. So being that I had played music coming up and I had done dance, but then I also understood a little bit about, how to plug things in or how to rig things up. So it was a bit of a, however kind of space that I can fulfill that I would have. I ended up going to grad school to focus on performance and interactive media arts at Brooklyn College. And over time, I had to move away from performance, as Lauren had said, as you continue to get older, and in terms of particular challenges that your own body has, that I started to move more towards design and less from performance, but always keeping that in mind. Because my background had been in music and movement, for me, those were two key languages that I used to score sound. So not only being able to think about all the technical aspects of how a sound system or how a video system works together, but also looking at performers and looking at directors and being able to score how their movement was, how they were interacting with each other, and understanding within each collaboration how people were communicating creative ideas. Some people talk about specific assignments, and other people talk a little bit more metaphorically. So being able to, again, think about those questions and being able to put those together. I started to move more into interactive media arts. So the projection design part had opened up a lot to like virtual reality and augmented reality, but always coming back to presence. What is presence? Coming back to the body. Coming back to how people are interacting with a space or how people leave an impression on a space, and also looking at how what we call acoustic ecology, how human beings relate to their environment through sound, and understanding that everyone has their own, because of their own patterns and upbringings, have their own way that they're approaching this. And so again, just thinking about how people are thinking about sound and thinking about visuals and how they're communicating that, and then being also being able to look at the story and how to best work with it. Work-wise, I do run my own studio because I do not just work in theater, work in installation, work in video, also again in more virtual elements, but because of that, a lot of the work that I do is something that operates in teams. And so over time, from when I had finished undergrad until now, has been being able to work with other people, but then also being able to keep in touch and keep a network of folks for that, for moments where if we have a project, being able to bring in other people. It says sound and media design because oftentimes I do this together, but whenever I have joint designs like that, I always have additional collaborators to be able to bring the whole project to life. And the last thing I'll say in terms of coming up is that my first commission out of graduate school for me had jump-started the studio. Because at that time I was debating on how I wanted to approach working in my career. And so at that point I knew that for this commission I had to work on creating a documentary, and that was going to be the full-time task that I was doing. And so I knew that I needed to be able to reach out to folks that I knew, to be able to put a team together. I knew that I needed to have some sort of the beginnings of some kind of studio structure to be able to then repeat this after this project was over. And then also just to be able to have a container that can continue to grow. That was really key for me.
I think to get to the nitty-gritty of how do I get a job, I talk a lot about enmeshment, sort of the way that there's a matrix of relationships and work that opportunities, right? Both opportunities for yourself and opportunities that you're offering to your community, the people that you're with. And you think about, it's your relationships to the people that you know, the peers, the collaborators, the mentors, your relationship and knowledge of people and their work that you might not know, but might want to know, or might want to work with, and understanding that. Your people getting to know your work, so the times that you are showing your work and then people are like, oh, who's that? Then you become someone that they want to know and want to know more about your practice. And then also just like straight up applying for jobs, right? There's that kind of thing. And I'm curious, I have these moments in my history where I have real knowledge of things going like clink, 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 all these choices I've made, and they've been like this, and then there's a job, right? And I'm wondering if you can excavate sort of an example of that in your past that might be beneficial for us to hear. Sorry, that was on the list.
Oh, no.
Do you have one?
Yeah.
Okay.
In talking about when I had my first documentary commission, I also needed to pay bills as that was going on. And so because of the technical background that I had in sound and video, a lot of the connections that I've continued to develop have been through working as a technician. So working as a video engineer at Blue Man Group, or working as a audio engineer, Audible, like whatever, or my very first internship was at Roulette in downtown Brooklyn and working as an audio technician. But through that, they also had work calls where we would come and build the set or strike it or something. And from there, I got to meet other technicians and just like you ask other people, you start to develop relationships and start to like inquire about like what else is happening. And so from there, being able to get a job that I had continued to hold through school, working as an audio tech at Columbia University. So even though it wasn't designer work, and for folks that were looking from the outside, it was not the most glamorous thing. Being able to turn on a projector and hook up a microphone may not be creating something that is, with visuals all over the wall and stuff like that. But what it allowed me to do is to continue to examine how I'm working on design, and also being up to date on what people are using in this work. And then also just being able to just continue to connect. I also had, during grad school, had gone to various events and meetups in the city, and meeting other people outside of school for me was also very important. Not everyone has the same path, and there are so many people from various walks of life, and it's really important to know and to see that everyone has their own way of being able to enter in a path. It may not be a traditional path, it may not be the path that is written down in the book on how you must get into a field. But being able to just also live as a human being and be able to be in spaces, that also helps. All of those things, whether it's, a hard, hey, I need someone for this, do you know somebody, or just by happenstance that you intersect and meet folks. You had mentioned Sydney Skybetter. Sydney and I, we've also lived together before. So, there's so many different ways and so many different degrees of separation between people. And continuing to find ways to not only connect, but to also share what it is that you're working on, or share what it is that you're doing, and to just remember to, just also remembering to just continue to be, as strange as that might sound, all those things have been very helpful.
Okay, so when I also worked as a technician for a really long time, I think that people don't acknowledge that, they say like, oh, there's no small parts in theater, there's only small actors. I think it's the same thing about technicians. I think crew is, the crew for shows are as vital to the success of a designer's work as the designer themselves is. And understanding as a designer that kind of like base level, like from the keystrokes on the board to how the lights get hung, helps you create a scenario in which the crew can succeed and then your design can succeed. And so I worked as a technician. I have done audio engineering, I have done projection setup, I've done electrics, but it was my day off. And from a number of calls at a given theater, and I got a phone call from my friend Jillian, who was the company manager of Battleworks, and she said, Lauren, our stage manager's father has had a heart attack, and I need you to show up and help. The gala is today. And I said, okay, I'm getting in a cab. So I got a cab, got there, and that particular day was really simple. I was just basically managing the deck. I wasn't even calling the show. And the lighting designer, Bert Gilmore, was working out front, and we got to talking at the party afterwards, which I was graciously invited to after the show. And he's like, oh, we're having some conflicts because we also work for Steve Petroni and 3 other companies, and they're all touring the same 3 weeks in May. Could you do this? And I said, I don't know, I've never done it before. And they're like, well, you only learn to tour by touring. So we're gonna try it. And I took the job, and it was definitely trial by fire. I think I got like a grade back from them. They're like, that was okay, you could do better, but the show happened and everything went well. No one died. I had 100-degree fever the whole time I was there, so I was like, they were a little bit, it was different then. When you work when you were sick, you don't do that now. No one does that now. You call in sick to work. And the show goes on some other way, or the show gets canceled, which is much more reasonable. But yeah, and then they gave me some touring with Fireworks. And then that led to touring with Kegman. So like from there, and then that particular designer hired me as his assistant on a lot of work and his associate on other work. And then I worked for designers that he knew, like Rick Murray and other people, because they knew they could also ask me to stage manage the show when the show would happen. Because a lot of times, unfortunately, in smaller companies, they can't afford all the people. So some people end up doing multiple roles. So I'd say that was like one of those like the gear moments you're talking about. But so I think that from like how to get a job, I do a lot of hiring, right? And there's a few main ways I like to think about it. Every company has a different process, but I like to think of it as a group of equal collaborators coming together to do something. There is the primary artist who has like a coordinator or producer or production manager who brings people in to support that artist. And then there's the director-driven process, which is more common in theater than in dance or other more avant-garde formats. And the director-driven process is the director comes in with like, this is the list of collaborators I want to work with, right? And then it comes down to schedule, it comes down to time, it comes down to money. And to get a job as a designer specifically, I think you're going to find yourself working for years as a technician, and then doing design gigs on the side that are small or low paying, and then working, up through that, you're going to start to get more paying design gigs. At some point, you make a choice to assist. You get a designer who likes you just get along, or you've been introduced, or they've seen your work, or you've solicited it, you've emailed them and said, hi, I really admire your work. If you are looking for an assistant in the near future, I am available and interested in working with you, or you decide, okay, I need to go to grad school so that I can increase my network. Because one of the main things you do come out of grad school with, other than the time to have thoughtfully considered your art form in a concentrated way for a period of time and practice it in time and space, which is really important, is the network you get out of grad school. I had the network, which is one of the reasons I chose not to go to grad school. It was a very financially based decision. I just simply could not afford it, and felt that those spots would be better off with somebody who needed the time when I had mentors, and I didn't need that. Although, God, and then over time, you assist more, you maybe become an associate, and then your own designs start to grow in parallel outside of that. It becomes a scheduling game, and there are some life choices you make. As a designer, you decide to join the union, which is a great format to help set up your contracting and the business side of you, or you decide not to join the union, you stay in a different realm of the type of work you're in, or you decide to form a studio or a business or an LLC, which I recommend that if you are going to be conducting work as an independent contractor, you form a business no matter what. Just do it. After your first 5 years, it's worth it for tax purposes. And those are ways to move forward as a worker. I think how you develop as an artist is a more organic journey. But those are ways, and in terms of like getting that first job as a technician, you can send me your resume. My email is available somewhere, so even we'll send it to you. You can send me your resume and you can come and join my workforce. Like, there you go. Job offer 1 in the room.
I actually have a story. This goes back to like Vietnam actually. I was like obsessed with because I knew that was planning on making this a trilogy, or actually it was supposed to be 5 parts, I'm not really sure, but it's supposed to be a trilogy, so there's a 3rd one coming. So I was kind of obsessed with trying to figure out who Mayor Drawless, who's the director, was going to ask to do Four Yellow Redbacks, which is the sequel. And I have a good friend of mine, Sean One, who's a production designer, And I know Mayor Dallas, like we actually had met and we like went out to see a show, you know, it was one of those networking things, you know, I sent her a cold email, it's like, let's meet, you know.
Say that louder, the cold email thing. Just say.
It was a cold email, yeah. It was just
Yeah.
I admire your work, you know, let's meet, you know, let's go see a show together, then we can talk, and, you know, and she actually responded. We ended up going to see a show together, and, you know, but then nothing since then, you know, and we had a great time, you know, we talked for like an hour at the show, anything and everything, and then nothing again, and I was like, you know, but those little things, those interactions do leave impressions. You know, because then you might pop up in their life somehow. You know, they might see your work, and then it's like, oh, you have this person, I met her, and I thought it was great. You know, so just you keep putting yourself out there. So Sean, my friend, was like, so May's having like a birthday get together at this bar or whatever. He's like, do you want to come? And I was like, I'm crashing her birthday thing. Like, are you sure? Is that cool? I mean, like I met her once, and they're like, is that cool? I was like, okay. So I literally just, it was at a bar, so we went to this bar, and I was like, hey, what's going on? You know, and she was like, okay, whatever. But there were like a lot of other people there that I knew, again, like the small world. It was like, oh my God, Jen's here. You know, so I got to meet a lot of people. I ended up meeting an actor that I was going to work with in a few months. I was like, great, awesome. And at one point, after we had a few drinks, like May turns to me and she goes, hey, so are you available in April to do Parade of the Rednecks? And I was just like, oh my God. Like I tried not to like freak out, but I was like, yeah, totally. It was hot. But I was like freaking out the whole time. And I mean, to this day, I'm not really sure if it was like my presence being there was like what reminded her, or she had planned on reaching out to me, or, you know, who knows at this point, maybe one of these days, you know, maybe when we remounted next year, I'll have the guts to ask her and be like, so were you planning on asking me, or did you just, you saw me and you remembered, or, but yeah, so it was one of those weird like happenstance, and that was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, so things like that can definitely happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, the cold emails, I've done a lot of those for sure.
The coffees.
Yeah, let's grab a coffee. I'd love to pick your brain, you know, like, and you know, and I'm that person. If I get that email, it's like, yeah, if I have the time, totally, I'm all up for that, because like I didn't, when I was up and coming, I didn't have any mentors. I didn't have, so one of the reasons for me to go to grad school was like I needed to build that network, because I didn't have that network. So you know, I really want to be the person that I needed when I was in the company. So I'm more than happy to have coffee with people.
Coffee's available. I kind of want to open it up to the audience to ask questions, because I don't want us to just chat at you the whole time. Does anyone have any questions or prompting? I have more questions, but yes.
So something that I've experienced in the Sarah Lawrence Theater Department is that it's super interdisciplinary. So in my experience, I feel like I'm not necessarily an expert at any one thing, but I have like a lot of practice in a variety of different artistic avenues. So I guess with that, I don't know if you have any advice on like, do I need to pick a thing? Or do you have advice for people with, you know, a little bit of practice in one thing? Maybe I've asked my question enough.
Since I was coming from an interdisciplinary background, I'll offer this. You may find yourself in the beginning continuing to live in that interdisciplinary way, and to continue to be interdisciplinary is a challenge and a choice, but it's a very strong choice if that is the path that you decide to take. If you decide to branch off into a specific area, I think it comes down to in honest reflection and self-awareness of what it is that you know and what is it that you don't know and what you would like to find out, and then sorting out from there how you want to move along. For the things that you do know how to do, how can you either create that on your own or collaborate with other people, or just make it aware that that is something that you would like to do and do more of, and then be open to whatever opportunities may come For the things that you don't know, if you have the ability to assist another designer, that might be a way. Personally, when I was coming up, I didn't have the opportunity to assist, and so it was a lot of like just figuring things out the hard way, but like still continuing to always be open to learning. I think one of the challenges about graduating is that realizing that the learning process is not over and it will never be over, and that there's no final spot of like, okay, this I have made it here. There's a certain place that you arrive at where you may say, like, in this moment, how things are going, I'm okay with this, or in this moment, you know, I'm not okay, and I would like for things to change. What can be done? But you're always going to be learning, whether that's new programs, meeting new people, going to different places, and to not be hard on yourself for that, and to give yourself grace for the things that you still have yet to discover.
There's a lot to be said for having a general skill set of the basics, because I think that in a design sense, we can become very siloed. And when that happens, I have seen, that there are people who in the field who are not good actors, and that they are inconsiderate. So I think the understanding at a basic level of what your fellow designers and people in the room are going through is very important, because it allows you to be a good collaborator. So it is a more defined path to specialize. There are definitely fellowships for lighting, fellowships for audio. There are fewer interdisciplinary fellowships. If you're trying to integrate performance into that as well as a designer, which I know I work with a lot of emerging artists at Abrams, and usually where they are in their career is that they have gotten just enough support and just enough money and just enough experience together to be like, I can't do it all on my own. So a lot of what I do is I like matchmake them with designers. I want your cards, so I can. Or I'm like, okay, you still want to do most of it yourself, and I'm going to help you figure out how to do that and provide you like a background brain. So I think that in a certain artistic path, that can be completely the way it happens. I think that there is a traditional model of American theater that does not work that way. And I think understanding where you want to be in the theatrical ecosystem is important. I thought I wanted to do Broadway shows. I thought I wanted that. And then I got to the off-Broadway level, was production managing and lighting off-Broadway shows, and was like, I don't necessarily like the people in the room. I don't necessarily like this process. I am more collaborative than this. I want something else. And chose to pivot, to go back downtown and work in a different sphere, and to stick with more dance and to stick with more of those things, because I was like, that's just not what, off-Broadway's not where I want to be right now. Maybe in 10 years off-Broadway will change, and I'll want to be there again, but not right now. So doing research, like reading, to be very honest, reading publications like American Theater Magazine or How Around Theater Commons are great ways to understand what the ecosystem that is very much in a sea change is doing right now, and also understanding physically where you want to be is very important. There's nothing wrong with saying, I want to do theater in the Midwest. You don't have to move to New York, you don't have to move to Chicago, you don't have to move to LA. In fact, there are very well-paying jobs in theater, not in major urban centers. And I think that knowing where you want to go in the short term versus the long term, and knowing that that's going to change for you, will help you use those interdisciplinary skills. I got off on one tangent, I'm sorry. But I think that where you're starting from is a strong place, and just knowing you can always change your mind. Like, I want to start doing lighting, and then you get halfway, you get 2 years into doing more lighting stuff, and you're like, actually I like video more. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind either.
Anyone else have a question? Yes.
Hi, I was just wondering about, I know that all these design disciplines have a lot of software you need to be using, and certain amounts of computer power, like, do you have to generally provide your own software and computers, or do you guys just use the?
No, we're all reading really deeply up here in relation to this question.
Okay, sorry.
No. I don't know what you use for costume design, but I have to use the commonly used for lighting designers is Vectorworks, and I also use. I have a very basic understanding of AutoCAD for if I'm working with someone who's in AutoCAD, because I have to adapt my files sometimes to help them or vice versa. And I have to use Lightwrite. I maintain that for myself and have for the last 15 years, but I definitely got away with a pirated license for the first 5 years that Aaron gave me. Like, he's like, pay for Lightwrite, pirate this until you have enough money. Which is not my official advice.
Save your educational vendor
Yes.
license.
Yes, just
keep it.
use it until you don't upgrade your software, don't upgrade your operating system, keep a separate computer to keep it on that never touches the internet. Keep that educational burden as long as you can.
We all understand.
Yeah, we all understand. And yeah, the drawings are going to have that watermark, and at a certain point in your career, people are like, why is there a watermark on the drawing? But then they get over it. But it's expensive, and yes, employers should provide that. But the problem is when you're piecing stuff together as a designer, you don't have a single employer. So what I would suggest you do as you figure out how much you want to be worth in the marketplace is to start factoring in what is the overhead of your business and to start having separate. And this is the official advice of the woman who's the business manager who works in process at the Guggenheim, because she teaches a class called Business for Freelancers. And she says that get a separate credit card, pay for everything that is business related on that credit card, and at the end of the year, those receipts, that's what you take off your freelance income. And that's how you're going to fix your taxes.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sound, for digital audio workstations, I prefer to use Reaper. However, Pro Tools is also an official industry standard for editing audio. QLab, I also use as well. I do not have my own license, but just whoever I'm collaborating with, I just always make sure that I have access to that to be able to program.
Doesn't the company, the company can rent that too,
Yeah.
which is different than all the other software.
Yeah, so I usually just, always when I have on the sound side, that's something that I always put in my list of things that I need. I need a QLab license to be able to work on X, Y, and Z for this period of time. But for digital audio workstations, there are a lot of similarities between them. It's helpful to know really well a particular program, but when you look at Pro Tools or Reaper, Ableton, Cubase, there are certain similarities that each program has, and there's a certain proficiency that you can get if you understand what the building blocks of a digital audio workstation is, so that if you do sit in front of a new program, that you can then be able to adapt and be able to work with it to get what it is that you need out of it. On the video side, ooh, okay. On the video side, it's a little different, and this is where the studio part comes into play. For media servers, there are so many different versions. There are so many different programs, and they all work for particular situations. There are some that you can want to use. Do you want to go more non-linear? You can do touch design. You can do Isadora. Do you want to do more of a theatrical media server? Okay. Do you have the budget to do watch out, or do you have the budget to do disguise if you're working on that kind of scale? Each of these programs, they may have a version that you cannot save, but you can open up and play with things and then close it again. And so I always am in the process of just finding time to sketch and just enter a flow for those programs, again, to just figure out how they work. And then when that time comes to use that particular program, that there's some level of understanding of how it works. The other part about it for video is that programs, as you move up in complexity, they run on Windows, whereas sound stuff, they run on Mac. And so for our studio, we do have to have both operating systems at all times, which is very challenging and frustrating, but unfortunately that's how it is. So with that, it again becomes what kind of operating system if you have a Mac, understanding that QLab is something that runs in a Mac, and so you can run audio, you can run video, or program like Isadora or Max for video, like those are things that can also run in a Mac environment. As you start to get into more intricate video systems, understanding that you either have to make that jump to Windows or to be able to work on a project in a space that can provide the resources for you to be able to put that together. So being able to have a project that has a budget that can provide those things for you to be able to work through. But all of that to say that there's so many, either trials or here's a demo version or a limited thing or open it up and make something and then delete it afterwards that may seem like it's not a good use of time because it's not permanent, but it's still, again, anything to continue to move you forward is very helpful.
Would you mind if I add something there?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I work with, a lot of younger designers, and there is a free version of everything. So if you don't have Photoshop, get GIMP. If you don't have, the money for Adobe Premiere or Final Cut, get Resolve. There are a lot of alternative programs out there, and they'll also maybe let you do things to a certain point. Again, maybe you can save, but you can't. Like QLab, you can pre-program everything in the audition window, and then you need the licensed output. There's also the option, a lot of times, something that's becoming more prevalent and that I kind of specialize in is that you network systems together. My partner is a networking specialist for theatrical applications. So like when we have a Windows person and a Mac person in a room, and both of them need to queue things through the same machine, we figure out the way to send things through OSC commands or some sort of protocol that will allow for all of those things to happen. So we'll also investigate those options if the company can't, or the company can rent you a computer, send it to your house with the appropriate software on it for 2 weeks for you to do all the prep. These are all things you can always ask for. If the company can't afford it, maybe they can't afford you.